So what we can see is that each of these separate elements of practice create this mandala, and the mandala is moving us ever towards this heart of practice, towards receptivity. Receptivity is the core activity of the spiritual life. It's also the unifying principle of any practice. Any practice has at its root receptivity. So if we really cultivate this quality of receptivity, everything else will arise naturally out of it. So I'm going to be talking about that in these different sections, different aspects. I'm going to be talking about receptivity as the heart of integration, the heart of positive emotion, the heart of spiritual death, and the heart of spiritual rebirth. But before that, I'm just going to tell you a little bit of a story. And this story, I've only got time to give you a little bit of it, but it's such a great story. Just set aside everything else and just focus on this. So the story is the water of life. So the king is ill. The king's always ill in these stories, and he's suffering from something that's completely incurable. Various physicians have been to see him, no one can solve what to do. But then he hears of the water of life. And he has 3 sons. So he asks the first son to head off to find the water of life, to come bring it back to heal him. And so the oldest son gets the best horse, crashes out through the castle gates, heads off in search on this quest. And as he goes out on this quest, he seems to have a clear idea where he's going, and he's racing down this road, and there's a dwarf by the side of the road who kind of beckons to him. But the son, the eldest son, just pushes straight through past the dwarf, kind of dismissing this kind of request to stop and have a chat. And this upsets the dwarf, so he sends this, bewitches the eldest son, and the eldest son finds himself, he can't actually stop careering forward, and he finds himself travelling down this mountain ravine, which is getting steeper and steeper, and as it descends it's also getting narrower and narrower, and he finds himself going down this such a pace down this mountain ravine that he and his horse eventually becomes completely wedged in this ravine. He can't go out, he can't go forward. He's just completely locked in this place. The story goes back to the castle. The second son is sent out. What's happened to the eldest son hasn't returned. They send out the second son, who again does exactly the same thing, ignores the dwarf and gets wedged in another ravine. Then the youngest son goes off, heads off, leaves the castle slightly more wary. And as he goes down the road, the dwarf again beckons to him, and he stops and has a conversation with the dwarf. And the dwarf asks him what he's up to, what he's doing, what he needs, what his needs are, what he's looking for, what he's searching for, and the dwarf tells him how to find the water of life. He heads off, and the story continues. He finds eventually the water of life. That's the only bit I can give you this evening. It is a great story, and the reason I mention it is this really important point in the story, is that the youngest son stops, turns towards the dwarf, and begins a dialogue, opens a communication with this person that he doesn't know why particularly what this dwarf is doing here, but just that simply opening to what's around him, he receives these gifts that actually then give him the clues as the way to find the water of life. So I find that a fantastic tale. And I think what this story tells us is to really learn to turn towards what's actually here. So if we get a set idea about this is the spiritual life, we have to go that way, we're going to head off, and we just crash through all our experience, crash through all this precious material that is here to teach us, to give us these gifts about how our practice can be developed, how our practice can be deepened. So this story really invites us to turn towards the dwarfs, turn towards the wizened hags that seem to appear beside us on the side of the road. These aspects of our life that appear that we can't quite make sense of. But if we just turn towards them, we can often find that there's something in these meetings, in these experiences, that are really precious. If we don't do that, unfortunately, as the story tells us, we tend to get wedged. We find ourselves stuck in some terrible cul-de-sac where we can't extricate ourselves, we can't go forwards or backwards, and that place of being stuck is extremely painful, extremely difficult place to extricate ourselves from. So this really talks about the first quality. So the first quality that we raise in terms of the spiritual practice, the system of practice, is integration. So what that means is that it can be really useful to open up, include all that's around in our experience. The more we kind of turn towards our experience, notice what is arising and pay attention to our actual experience. This can be really fruitful. And I think it's particularly fruitful to turn towards that which we tend to be resistant to. Turn towards the places that perhaps we'd rather not look at. Those places, those parts of our experience that we imagine maybe are too much or too little. So it might be anything. I can't look into your own personal experience, but it might be simply the sensation of pleasure, the sensation of joy, the sensation of aliveness can be too much sometimes. You kind of don't know quite what to do with it, what to make of these experiences. So we find it very hard to sort of turn towards those elements in our lives. Or maybe, it may be, of course, anxiety, worries, fears. These are very familiar states for all of us. Or we might just need to turn towards something which seems to be constantly carrying us away from our intention. So turning towards noticing that we thought we were going to be doing something today, and here we are an hour later doing something completely different. How did we get from that intention to here? What's happened? So this kind of turning towards really exploring our experience can be a very useful, a very crucial part of the spiritual life. And the reason for that is that all these different, the turning towards, we discover that our life is actually full of gifts. It might not feel like it in the moment, particularly if we're trying to turn towards something which is uncomfortable or difficult. Do I have to do that? But actually it can be really fruitful to to just really turn and explore what is arising in our experience. What happens, or what tends to happen, is that we tend to only notice the things that fit our preconceptions, our judgments and our expectations about how we are, how the world is. But the more we open and turn towards life as a whole, we notice how these preconceptions and judgments and views are actually kind of are limiting our lives. So this opening up to these patterns of our own being become a very integrating aspect of spiritual practice. So the more we turn towards our actual experience, the more we begin to join up this kind of disparate collection of desires, this disparate collection of different needs and wishes and hopes and fears that we call me, I, you. This becomes a bit more whole. So we don't just identify with this part of ourselves or that part of ourselves. We actually start to realise, acknowledge that we are this whole breadth of experience that we are calling me. And the more that we do this, the more we can open up to the riches of our own life, but also the riches of our relational life, the riches of meeting another. And this opening, this kind of enriching, is slow, repetitive work. There is no kind of instant fix to this level of integrating ourselves, integrating the whole of ourselves. Just to finish that little piece, just want to when we use the term receptivity and integration, when we're looking at that, I think one of the really useful phrases that kind of been with me for a while is this, comes, unfortunately I couldn't track down who said it originally, but it comes from a Zen teacher. And the phrase is not to. So I thought that was, I think that's fantastic, not to. So whatever is happening, we tend to kind of keep splitting our experience. So we're splitting into, I really want to meditate. I actually just want to sit on the sofa with my glass of wine and the TV. Not to. How can we hold those experiences, those different experiences, without making one right and one wrong? How can we integrate those so that we become aware that within that experience there is flexibility, there's a possibility of movement. So not to. So what receptivity does is continually opens and includes. It creates more space. So this is what not to does. It just includes, expands our experience. So not to, this is what creates integration. It integrates these many different facets of our lived experience. Because we are contradictory, we are ambivalent, we are uncertain, or we are very certain. And this is the complexity of being human. And really the spiritual life is mostly about becoming human.